Welcome to Responding to Human Trafficking for Pregnancy Resource Centers. This is Module 2, and we'll be looking at risk factors. After completing this module, you will be able to list general risk factors for human trafficking, understand risks for commercial sexual exploitation of children and domestic minor sex trafficking, describe factors in your geographic or demographic area, discuss ways of exposing risk factors during client interviews, and compile a list of mitigating social services in your community. Virtually anyone can become vulnerable to traffickers. Catastrophic weather events, natural disasters, and warlike circumstances that displace people and separate them from social support systems are all real possibilities. The most obvious risk factor is poverty. Systemic corruption is a major contributor of poverty worldwide. Without any other resources, people will do whatever they need to do to survive. Our inner city and very rural areas are rife with poverty. For the people living in these pockets, it can be difficult to imagine a way out. Poverty in the U.S. is often a temporary state. People here have opportunities to engage in education and entrepreneurship. General risk factors, instability, insecurity, and lack of support are common to all types of human trafficking and affect people who have emotional or cognitive deficits, have been displaced to a foreign land or are homeless, have been placed in foster care or have run away from home, may have disabilities or abilities that can be exploited, may be of an age that traffickers specifically target, may have experienced trauma or traumatic events, especially early in life, such as sexual abuse, may be LGBTQ or gender dysphoric, lack personal resources, lack educational opportunities, experience language barriers, or engage in substance misuse or abuse. There are risk factors specific to commercial sexual exploitation of children and domestic minor sex trafficking. 80 to 90% of adult survivors of sexual exploitation reported child sexual abuse. Physical, mental, and emotional abuse are also common. A transient lifestyle or frequent relocation disrupts trusting relationships that can provide safety in reporting abuse. Domestic violence affects children's perception of what love should look like. Overly permissive parenting or excessively critical parenting may cause insecurities. Efforts to shift the culture toward accepting hebephilia or sexual attraction to 11 to 14-year-olds is on the rise. Gender dysphoria's surge into the public schools at younger and younger ages increases confusion and may make more children vulnerable. It happens where you live. Humans have been subjugating other humans since ancient times. Human trafficking happens by force, fraud, or coercion all over the world. Where you live, different forms of exploitation may be happening. One or more types of trafficking can be prevalent in different geographic areas. Categories of trafficking depend on economics, travel logistics, and demographics. For example, agricultural areas may see more labor trafficking, traveling sales teams, and child labor. Areas where entertainment and sports industries are prevalent or where large conventions are held may see more sex trafficking. Wealthy areas may experience more domestic servitude, restaurant labor, or trafficking in body parts. Let's look at forced farm labor. Unsuspecting laborers from severely impoverished nations might not know what reasonable compensation should be. They might not speak the language. Traffickers might confiscate their IDs and other documents. Victims might not be allowed to leave the property where they're working. Exploitation, which includes exploiting forced labor, slavery, or similar practices, doesn't require transportation, but it may involve moving people around. For example, migrant workers are brought in for seasonal farm work. They might be recruited by traffickers posing as legitimate employment agencies. Victims don't usually know they are victims. Most won't self-identify. Which type of trafficking might you see? Is your community thriving? Is construction booming? Manual laborers, construction or landscaping workers may be trafficking victims. Though usually men, you might see them in your center with their wives or girlfriends. Women trafficked for labor might be hotel staff, nail salon technicians, housekeepers, or other domestic help, restaurant staff or food preparation workers, Typically, it's any type of piecework or other labor that is easily missed by the IRS. Illicit activity, especially sexual exploitation, is likely more prevalent among your clients than you think. Almost 88% of women trafficked for sex came in contact with healthcare providers while they were being trafficked. Some parts of the country have a lot of seasonal work. Farming and agriculture are not the only enterprises that seek seasonal laborers. Ski resorts, vacation destinations, local fairs, carnivals, parks, and places of recreation are all areas traffickers can control and exploit temporary workers. Illicit gang activity is found in virtually every major city in the United States. A gun or drug may be sold once, but a person may be sold again and again. Human trafficking is a huge profit center in which people may be used for sexual exploitation, or as mules for transporting illegal goods, or for committing other crimes. Bars, cantinas, strip clubs, massage parlors, escort services, and indoor or outdoor prostitution can be anywhere, but in some parts of a city or a state, it's more concentrated. Buyers of sex often look for anonymity in places they can pass through, like heavily traveled roads, airports, and truck stops. When conducting an intake interview, you must provide complete privacy. You may only have a few minutes to talk with your prospective client alone. Uncovering vulnerabilities is still very possible if you combine the questions from the domestic violence assessment you already use with some trafficking-specific ones. Module 1 defined human trafficking by breaking it into 3 elements: the criminal acts, the means used to commit those acts, and the goals or the forms of exploitation. Keep this in mind during the intake interview process. You can expose risk factors by incorporating a few new questions or slightly varying the questions you already use in your domestic violence assessment. If your client is an adult, it is essential that you keep in mind that she is autonomous. Your role is to offer support and resources, not rescue. Trafficking victims by definition are denied their autonomy. Exposing risk and confirming she's being prostituted doesn't mean she's ready to get out. One sex trafficking survivor says, "Respect the no." Your patient support and gentle coaching style questions may be just what she needs. The recidivism rate is high among trafficked persons. She may need some time for the seeds of hope for a better life to grow. You might show her what healthy, loving relationships look like and contrast some positive exchanges with abusive ones so she can identify what she's experiencing for herself. Your careful questioning and observation could save her life. A good set of domestic violence screening questions is helpful. For example, has anyone punched, kicked, or slapped you? Have you been raped or sexually assaulted? Questions related to trafficking involve autonomy and self-reliance. Do you have access to your ID? Do you keep all of the money you earn? If not, who does? Where do you sleep? Who do you live with? What do you do in your free time? The Module 2 folder in the knowledge base in your course room includes screening tools and questions developed to help you serve your clients. This module is focused on risk identification. Subsequent modules will focus on specific indicators, language awareness, and protocol development. When you gauge risk factors for trafficking, you won't change what you ask about, only broaden your thinking relative to living situation, employment, health status, relationship status, and personal resources. Let's take a moment to define personal resources. Personal resources come in categories: financial, having money to buy goods and services; emotional, having the ability to choose and control emotional responses; mental, possessing the intellectual ability and acquired skills such as reading and writing to function in life; spiritual, believing in a divine purpose and guidance; physical, being healthy, mobile, and active; support systems, having friends, family, and other external resources to access in times of need; role models, having adults who are good role models and who do not engage in self-destructive behavior; group rules, knowing the unspoken cues and habits of a group; community, maintaining relationships with people in groups, like school, church, coworkers, teams, clubs, as well as family; resilience is a resource. Adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, put people at risk for many problems later in life, including vulnerabilities to victimization. Resilience factors include all of the resources listed on the previous screen, but at a more rudimentary level, it is the belief that we matter, that our lives are worthy of care and protection, and that we have a purpose in life. Pregnancy centers nationwide offer a variety of resources that convey that everyone who walks through the door is valued, but trafficked or abused people cannot gather it from inferences. They need you to tell them that they're important and that you care about them and that our Creator cares about them. They may never have had anyone tell them this before. I was 18 years old before I knew genuinely good people, like you, existed in the world. If your center has been around for a while, the list of social services that you will have will likely be substantial. From food and clothing to housing assistance and financial help, you know which agencies are ready to assist women with an unexpected pregnancy. If your client is facing a domestic violence situation, you should have a ready resource available to provide for her safety. Trafficking is like domestic violence on steroids. A shelter might serve as a temporary solution, but trafficking victims usually suffer complex trauma. While a few domestic violence services might be equipped to handle them, trafficking victims may need years of intensive compassionate care. Your Child Advocacy Center, Homeland Security, local FBI, and Polaris Project are the best places to find longer-term solutions in your community. Let's talk about minors and mandatory reporting. The complexity of the dangers involved in reporting any human trafficking situation, and in particular those of domestic minor sex trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation, are examined in depth in a later module. We briefly touch on the major points here. Handlers, traffickers, or pimps may be present with a minor, posing as a supportive friend or relative. Great care must be taken to ensure the safety of everyone involved, including you, other staff and volunteers, and the victim. Healthcare workers who become aware of any child abuse are mandatory reporters across the country. In all cases, it is very important to adhere to strict safety protocols. A bit more about reporting. All healthcare providers have a duty to report suspected abuse for clients who meet the following criteria. For all patients under 18 years of age, report to your state's version of Child Protective Services or Division of Children, Youth, and Families, and law enforcement must be notified. If the client is over 18 years old with a gunshot wound, stab wound, or other serious injury, law enforcement must be notified. If an adult is incapacitated, meaning they cannot care for themselves, their home, or their finances, and are not able to delegate responsibly, the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services must be alerted. It is imperative that we maintain trust with our clients. Should a client disclose abuse, explaining reporting requirements, and that you or someone else, such as a social worker, will walk them through the process will really help. Always do your best to provide a warm handoff by providing a personal introduction. What's next? After completing the quiz on the next screen, go to the knowledge base in the course room and review the following materials.